I really was wanting to put something in the world that the grown-up gets as much out of it as the kids do. More, arguably. I really believe that something special happened with this story. We could not believe how many people jumped on board to help us bring this thing to the screen.
It is the most amazing thing to be in a position now where we can bring this to the screen.
It's whimsical and it's fun, but it's also got a lot of heart. My goal is to make you cry as much as you laugh.
You can't just run off.
They've got a pop rocket!
Really? When you ran off, I had to leave Lily alone. Lily?
Lily!
He's a plucking of feathers.
Aye, Clark, and the black carriage is here.
Hey. Whoa.
What's up,
That was
everybody?
at the same time. How's it going, Andrew? What's going on?
It's good. It's good to see you.
Well, I guess maybe
maybe
the better
just-
question is where is this going on?
Where is going on? Can you hear me okay? I am walking through the streets of Oxford, England. We just had our Rabbit Room conference here called Hutchmoot, and it was we have a UK version, which we haven't been able to do because of COVID until this year, and so we had about 160 people in a little church here in Oxford, and we spent the weekend celebrating the way God moves through stories and art and music and community, and it was awesome. So here we are, and we decided it would be fun to do one of the live streams from here.
Man, that's awesome, Andrew. Holy smokes. That looks so cool. Look at that lamppost.
It is pretty cool. So I don't know if now is the time to do it, but at some point I have kind of a fun reveal. We can save it if you want, but yeah, I'm going to show you a little better detail of where I am exactly. But
yeah, let me go through kind of what we're going to be doing today, and then maybe we can take a look real quick. For those who don't know me, I'm the script coordinator on the Wingfeather Saga animated series. I've been getting to help with the writer's room and anything involving audio, script. So in the casting and in the recordings, I've been sitting on those and helping with those as well. But today's live stream is going to be awesome. We have we're going to kind of talk with Andrew a little bit of the hows and the whys of the Wingfeather Saga. Why it was written, how it was written. And finally, goodness gracious, you guys have been almost like pounding down our doors for this one, but we have our third part of our casting reveal. And there's a very important cast member being revealed today. And we'll also be at the end answering some questions. So if you have any questions, please start asking them in the comments below, and we'll try to get to them in the end. I also want to remind everyone that we have some merch up on the wingfeathersaga.com/store. We have some awesome t-shirts right there. I do, biasly love the Toothy Cow one. But if you go there, you can find them and pick them up. And some awesome shirts. Also, I know you guys have been wondering this, but season 1 is almost here. This is crazy. We're getting so close. We're going to be releasing some dates pretty soon on when those will be premiering and streaming. In production, we're closing in on episode 1 in post. Episode 6 is currently, just locked at Animatic. So we're getting there. We're getting close. We're working hard. And if you want to learn more a little bit of what we're doing for season 2, You can go to angel.com/wingfeather to find out a little bit more. But yeah, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and show us where you are?
Okay, so the Rabbit Room, which is a ministry that I'm a part of back in Nashville, which hosted Hutchmoot, it was inspired by a room in the back of a little pub called the Eagle and Child, which is the nickname of the Eagle and Child is the bird and baby. And a lot of people who know C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and kind of the lore of the Inklings, you know, their friends that used to get together, sometimes in Lewis's rooms at the college he taught at, but sometimes they would find themselves at this pub down the street. And the name of the back room of the pub is the Rabbit Room. And I remember coming to Oxford the first time many years ago, and had to make my, C.S. Lewis pilgrimage to the Eagle and Child, and went back into the room and saw that room was nicknamed the Rabbit Room. And so that kind of gave birth to the idea, which became the ministry that we know as the Rabbit Room. And so this little passageway where I am right now is one of the most magical little spots in the whole city to me. So the colleges are back that way. The college that Lewis and Tolkien would have taught at. So this is the passageway they would have taken to get to the pub whenever they wanted to, hang out, talk about their stories or whatever. And so I'm going to turn my camera around and show you. Look at this tree growing out of the side next to this old stone wall. Just this amazing tree. And so I'm going to kind of hold it sideways. So if you walk right down this way, what some people don't know is that there wasn't just one pub that they hung out at. There was actually another one across the street that was a favorite haunt of the Inklings, and it was called the Lamb and Flag. And I'm pretty sure it's called Lamb and Flag Passage. So this little alleyway just past that big, beautiful tree. Let me turn it around so you can see it. Look at that. And I love the lamppost kind of off in the corner. There are lots of little nooks like this in Oxford. So if you walk here, you can see, sadly, the windows are all kind of covered with some kind of paint because they are renovating it, and it's closed right now. So the Lamb and Flag, right in here, you probably can't see in the windows. No, you can't really see anything. But right in there is where Lewis and Tolkien and their buddies would sometimes hang out. If you come through this little passageway, you come to a part of town called St. Giles. I don't know if you can see Lamb and Flag Passage. And then right here, straight across the street, right there, is the Eagle and Child. And so I'm going to cross the street and try not to get, honked at by a bus. I know it's a little bit, the internet connection is a little crazy. You can see the Lamb and Flag behind me. There it is. And then I'm going to cross this big street. There's no traffic because it's kind of late here. It's like 8 o'clock in Oxford. So right across the street, here we come. Getting closer and closer to the Eagle and Child. It's just like if you're a Lewis or a Tolkien fan, this place is like legendary. You're kind of like, and sadly, the Eagle and Child is also closed because they're in the process of doing some kind of renovation thing. So it's a huge bummer to not be able to go in there. But ordinarily, you can go sit in the Rabbit Room and order some fish and chips and hang out where those guys used to hang out. So let me get closer to you here. So, isn't that so cool?
That is so cool.
There it is. There's the Eagle and Child. So,
man, that's incredible.
Kind of a really inspiring place to be if you're a person who grew up reading those stories, if you're a person who really believes in the power of story, and maybe if you're the kind of person who is crazy enough to try to figure out how to write a story. Coming to a place like this is kind of like a reminder that, this is just like people who do this stuff, Mm-hmm. They weren't superheroes. They were just people, and they were remarkable people. But at the same time, it's like kind of comforting to know that this was a place where normal people came and hung out, and they just kind of did the work of making stuff. And it just so happened that the stuff they made changed a whole lot of people's lives, mine included.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool, Andrew. Oh my gosh. I know that we have I'm sure we have a lot of fans of Lord of the Rings and of their works in the live stream. So I know this is like an awesome treat for everyone. How does it feel? Is it Does it kind of feel a little magical? I know it's just like a store or like a little pub, but does it kind of feel a little magical?
Well, it feels especially magical the first time you see it, and it's a little bit of that kind of like fanboy wonder does wear off, but in the best way. You kind of like are just like, okay, yeah, this is. I love the fact that the world has some. The whole world is sacred, you know, and there are some places where you feel it more than others. And this is one of those places for me.
Man, that's so cool. I'm very jealous. And we'll talk a little bit about this more later, but someone asked you some questions about this, but you also happen to own Tolkien's fireplace at the Rabbit Room, right? Well, or maybe not you, but the Rabbit Room has it.
Well, yeah, I don't own it, but the Rabbit Room has a house called Northwind Manor, which is kind of this gathering place for to kind of embody the things that we believe in the Rabbit Room. And so when we were building the place, the Tolkien's fireplace from his house in Oxford was for sale by a collector, and I found out about it, and I emailed the guy and said, hey, this is crazy, but I'm a part of this ministry. We're building this house that kind of represents the heart of what Tolkien and Lewis were doing, and oh man, we're going to have a fireplace. It'd be so cool if you could come down in your astronomical price a little bit so that we could maybe raise the money to put it in this house. And he emailed me right back and said, oh man, I love the Rabbit Room. You know, we've been following you guys for years. And so he was very kind and helped us work out a way to get it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I think people in England are a little mad because it's like we're stealing their treasures. But the other side of that is England has stolen a whole lot of treasures over the years. So yeah, they're getting a little taste of what it feels like.
Yeah, I remember, I think I was hanging out with your son, Aiden, when it arrived over at Northwind, because I remember we were hanging out in your office, and you come in, you just like threw open the door, and we're like, guys, I need your help right now. It was like midnight. We're like, okay, sure. And we walk outside, and there's this white van out in the driveway, and you're like, come on over here. We're like, oh my gosh, are we about to, what's going on? And you're like, we have Tolkien's fireplace in this van. I was like, oh no, did we steal it? What happened? You know, I was like,
no, it weighed about 2,000 pounds. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was a little bit before Northwind got built. We were kind of like throwing it in there. Yeah. It was kind of part of the like renovation process from what I remember. But man, I'll never forget that. That was a really funny night. But we'll keep talking about it in one moment. I want to go ahead and shoot up the casting reveal video so that everyone can finally see who maybe one of our more important characters is. And if you missed all the other ones that we had shown prior, we will have a full casting video up on the Wingfeather YouTube. So go ahead and look at that if you haven't. But right now, let's go ahead and go into the video.
Hi, Ellie. Good to see you.
Hi. I'm so glad to be here.
We are so glad to welcome you to Wingfeather Saga.
I'm such a fan of this project, and so it's really sweet to get to be any part of it.
People that don't know, you read Wingfeather Saga. Can you tell us about like reading it and what you response to it?
I flew through this series, but I fell in love particularly with Podo. Ended up writing a song inspired by his story.
And you and I, for people that don't know, got to work together on Slugs and Bugs on an episode and had a great time together. And I was like, Ellie is so fun on camera. I wonder if she could do voicing. And so I was delighted when Ned sent over the audition he did with you. And Andrew and I both like, oh my gosh. Alkeo, congratulations. We are so glad to welcome you to the Wingfeather Saga.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
So excited for you, man.
It's been great getting to know you and kind of hearing just what you've brought to Janner so far.
I'm about like halfway into the first book that we got like 2 days ago.
Wow.
Oh, nice. Oh, I'm so glad. That's got to be such a weird feeling to be reading this book knowing that you've been cast as the dude who's going to be playing the main guy. I can't imagine.
With Janner's lines, I've been like saying them out loud and seeing how it felt.
Oh, that's so good. Awesome, man. I love it.
Stabbish elbows, exceedingly hoppy hinder parts.
Oof. Never knew a dig toad would be that big.
Yeah.
Oh man. We are so excited to have Ellie and Alkeo on our team. They've been doing such a good job. Andrew, I just wanted to ask you, because I've been kind of sitting in on this process a little bit, but what kind of drew you to Ellie and Alkeo in this casting decision? Like what made you choose them?
Well, Ellie is a dear friend, and she is just clearly one of the most delightful people you'll ever meet. And she was on the Christmas tour that I do every year, several years ago, and had just put out a record. And every night she sang this song that was inspired by Poto's story. And it's like, you wouldn't really know it. It's just this really beautiful song about the gospel. But she was so moved by Poto's story that whenever it came time to like go, hey, let's dream about who might be good for this, she was an obvious choice. And she has this wonderful raspy voice, you know, so much character to her voice that I just thought she's gonna nail it, and she did. And then I will say about as far as Alkeo goes, which by the way, what a cool name. One of the things that was important to us with this thing is that we wanted the kids especially to sound like real kids, you know. It's one of the things we keep kind of drilling home, like this isn't, you know, a kid show, this is an epic fantasy. And so we don't want the kind of like over the top acting thing to happen too much. We really want it to feel grounded, and like in almost every session that we've had with these kids, like we kind of say, hey, just react to this as if this was actually you doing it. And that's like kind of where we start, because we want the kids to know that like this feels real. So Alkeo had this real ability to, man, there's one scene where he screams Poto's name. I don't know if you remember that moment in the recording, but like Poto's in danger and Janner goes, Poto, no, or Grandpa, no. And like it made it all of us, like it kind of took our breath away, but it sounded like a real kid who was shouting to try to save his grandpa. And so he's just got this great ability to act really well, but also make it feel like whatever is happening on screen is actually happening to a real person.
Yeah, no, I remember actually that moment as well. And I think I remember telling him, I was like, dude, I just got chills from that. That was incredible. He was like, yeah, I don't know. I just kind of was thinking he was my real grandpa. I was like, exactly. No, he's been doing fantastically, and we're so excited to have him and Ellie both on the team. And while you're on the stoop, Andrew, I thought we might go ahead and just start. I know there's a lot of people who already know the Wingfeather Saga and have probably listened to a lot of interviews about this, but there are probably also a lot of people who are coming because they wanted the TV series, maybe they haven't read the books. And I kind of want to talk through, you know, the story from the beginning of the Wingfeather. And it's perfect that you're here, right where, you know, it all started, in quotes. And I really wanted to touch on the Rabbit Room first, because the Rabbit Room has really grown into this, really large in the sense of the impact it's making on the people around it. Not only is it, you know, helping artists, it's, you know, it's putting on, they just had a play that they produced that your brother, like, you know, wrote and directed. And I just kind of want to talk about what the Rabbit Room is and its connection to Oxford. I know you just spoke on that a little bit, but for those of you, know, maybe missed it, kind of retouch on that. Because I think it's like a special connection. It's important.
Yeah, it is. So living in Nashville as a singer-songwriter, you know, that's what drew me there 25 years ago or so. And it was, you know, it was one of those things where you're there for the first year. A lot of people come and they're like, what do you do when you get to Nashville if you're a music person? And what I usually say is like, give it at least a year. Like nothing crazy is going to happen, you know, in a few months. You may feel really out of sorts and kind of lonely, and Like you don't know what to do next. But like, especially if you're a Christian and you become a part of a church community and you get to know people, and you kind of look up a year after you move there and realize that you have a lot of friends that you didn't have before, you know? And there's this really rich community that is doing more than just like, you know, it's not about making connections. It's about living life, and life is meant to be lived in community, right? And so, so I remember noticing probably 10 years into my career that there was this really sweet spirit of friends that had all kind of moved to Nashville with the same dreams and had the same mission kind of in their hearts. And we had all found each other. And there were a lot of times when, you know, music is hard. You're basically just signing up to be self-employed for your adult life. And it can be kind of financially scary, and it's emotionally difficult because you're putting yourself out there. And so to find yourself in a community of friends who are there to remind you that what you're doing is good, and they're there to cheer you on when you feel bad, you're there to cheer them on. And, you know, in the long run, what you realize is that what you've gained is not just, you know, better quality of song. It's not like you just became a better songwriter. You do, but also you end up with these lifelong friends. And so that's the precursor. And of course I loved, you know, grew up reading the Narnia books and the Lord of the Rings, and loved these fantasy novels. They were hugely, had a huge impact on my imagination and kind of my philosophy of like why I want to do what I do, you know? And so came to Oxford, came into the Eagle and Child right behind me, and walked into the Rabbit Room, and just was overwhelmed with this sense that, or I guess a realization that, you know, Lewis and Tolkien and Charles Williams and Warren E. Lewis and all the guys that used to gather, Dorothy Sayers was an honorary Inkling too. Like, it wasn't just a bunch of nerds sitting around smoking pipes and stroking their beards and talking about, you know, the Latin translation of whatever classical work. It was really, I think it was friends hanging out. You know what I mean? Like it was like the friendship was to me what struck me most about it. And what I saw was a similarity between the friendship of the people that hung out in this pub and the friendship of the friends in Nashville. It's like none of us are as smart as the Inklings, obviously. But, you know, probably never have an impact like they did. But there's something about the spirit of what the Inklings were doing that I thought, you know, how do we bottle that up? How do we emulate some of those principles? Not to sit around talking about how great they were, even though sometimes that does happen, but to cast a vision forward and go, what were the things about their friendship and their community that shaped their imaginations, their work ethic, their understanding of language, their understanding of who God is and how our hearts work, that gave birth to Aslan and Lucy and the Pevensey kids and Frodo and Bilbo and you know, the Charles Williams books, you know what I'm getting at. And so there's something really cool about that to me. So that's where the Rabbit Room was born, the ministry of the Rabbit Room. So I just bought the domain name rabbitroom.com, and we kind of started an experiment in community. And now we have Tolkien's fireplace. So it's that's a vast oversimplification of the story, but you know, it's just been really cool. We published books. My brother is a book editor and a writer himself. He's a playwright. We just launched the Rabbit Room Theater program and put on The Hiding Place, Corey ten Boom's story in Franklin. And we put on the local show, monthly concerts. We have forums. There are lectures that we do. There are film nights that we do. And, you know, all that stuff is kind of just an excuse to get people together. Because when people find each other, you know, a new story is born.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like that's kind of what art is all about, is, you know, trading true and great and good ideas that, you know, with each other. And I think that only makes it better, is to, you know, be around other people who, even if they don't think the same way as you, can, you know, dip their toes in this, in what you're creating.
One of one of the things we say a lot is that art nourishes community, and community nourishes art. There's this symbiotic relationship that happens, that exists there. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the great things about art is that it reminds us that we're not alone. And so that is it's a high calling in some ways. You know, I don't want to make too much of it, but it is. It's an important thing. Like, who wants to live in a world without good stories, good art, good songs? And so, those of us called into that work, it's good to have allies.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Speaking of art, I want to talk a little bit about your writing process for the Wingfeather Saga. I've heard this a couple times, and I thought it was really fascinating. Could you tell everyone, where you were when you were just about to start writing the Wingfeather Saga, and how that decision was so difficult? Because I think some people might think it's just this easy, like you sit down, you're like, ooh, I'm going to write an awesome story, and then this is the best, and then you turn it in, and it sells a bajillion copies or whatever, and then you're done. But now I've heard from you almost, the opposite, where it was kind of this hard thing. It wasn't easy to sit down and write this entire epic of, stories.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I'm trying to remember the details of how it began. Like, I wanted to write since I was a little boy. And, most kids try at some point writing stories. But, even up into high school, I was trying to write novels. I had these big dreams of learning how books worked. I loved to read. I loved to draw. I was a big comic book kid. I also loved music. Pretty much anything artistic got my attention. And it wasn't until I put out a couple of records, I was a dad. My wife and I, we were raising our family in Nashville, and had gone through the process of making albums, of writing songs, of doing tours, and realized that art is work, that it isn't something that just kind of happens to happen. You have to mean to do it, and sit down and do the hard work, with this voice in your head that nobody's ever going to hear the song, or nobody's ever going to read your book. You've got to fight against that and do the thing. And so what really got me started was reading the Narnia books to my kids. It was Aiden and Asher were probably 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Sky was just a baby, so she wasn't old enough to get it. She's actually, we talked to her today. She's reading the Narnia books right now. And so I read those books, and man, there's just something magical about them. As a believer, they're profoundly moving. And to see the way they worked on my kids' hearts, the way they worked on my heart while I was reading them for the first time as an adult, or as first time as a dad, I just was like, I've got to know what it's like. I've got to know what it's like to write a story. And so I talked to my wife, and I was like, hey, I need you to hold me accountable to this. I'm really going to do it this time. Like, I have to know what it's like to finish, because writing isn't writing. Writing is finishing. You can't really call yourself a writer until you've fought your way through that first draft, I think, and come to the end of a story and held it in your hands and been like, okay, here is a story. Because that's the moment where you begin to realize light bulbs begin to go on, and you can go back and fix things, and you understand how the story arc works, and you see all the problems and begin the editing process. You can't really edit it until you've got the first really bad version of the story, And so, yeah, I was sitting at home and had written a bunch of first chapters and was stuck, and realized that I needed to build the world before I could write the story. And so I got out my high school sketchbooks and drew a map and populated it with rivers and towns and oceans, and just felt like I was 12 years old again. And by the time I was done, there was Glipwood Forest and the little town of Glipwood, and there was Dang, and there was the Dark Sea of Darkness, and I just suddenly I knew where Janner lived, and that kind of gave me what I needed to get going.
Yeah, and I'm also interested too. I feel like a really close sister to the how you've done something is the why, and why of all the story. There's an infinite amount of stories you could have told, but specifically why the Wingfeather Saga. Did you know going in that at the end, I won't spoil the end of the book for anyone who hasn't read the book, but at the end, that the ending was going to be what it was? Or was it a surprise to you as well,
Yeah, there are things that you kind of have a hunch are going to happen, and those things suggest themselves to you as you're writing. The story morphs. I tried, I didn't outline the whole thing. I tended to write chapter synopses, and so I would write chapter 1, this happens, chapter 2, this happens, chapter 3. And I would probably go like 5 or 6 chapters of just paragraph long, these are the beats. This is what I imagine might happen in the story. And then you sit down and you start fleshing out chapter 1. It's like, okay, I know what's going to happen. Now I'm going to tell about it. And by the time I would get to chapter 3 or so, the paragraph or the chapter synopses were the story had diverged from the synopses that I'd been writing. So all of the ideas for chapters 4, 5, and 6 no longer mattered. I threw them out because now the story was taking on flesh. And so yeah, I had a sense of what Kalmar / Tink's story arc was going to be. I knew Pete's backstory, Pete the Sockman's backstory. I had to come up with Nag the Nameless's backstory. Like, if you're going to have a supervillain, then you got to know why he's a villain. Why did he destroy the Shining Isle? Why is he after the Jewels of Veneer? And so had to do a lot of like quote unquote research into the history of the world in order to know what was going on. So yeah, there were like things that I had a hunch would happen that didn't happen, and other things that I had a hunch would happen happened in a better way than I could have imagined. And so yes, in a sense, I did have a version of the ending in my mind, and I was writing toward that ending. Like, it's almost like I said before, it's like you're imagine a family that gets in their car in Boise, Idaho, and they're like, we're going to drive to Disney World in Orlando, but we're not going to use a map. It's like, we know where we're going. We know it's in the South, and let's just drive and see how hard it is to find it. That's kind of what writing this book was like for me. It was like I had this picture in my mind. One of the Pixar principles is that I think they call it the keystone image. Maybe you remember Andrew Stanton talks about this. Like, for Finding Nemo, the keystone image was the reuniting of the father and the son. You're like, that is the heart of what the story is about. And they had it on the wall, I think, at Pixar. And whenever they were writing the story, they were like, is the thing we're doing getting us closer to that moment? You know what I mean? Like, is it serving that emotional core, right? And so I did have a sense of the emotional core of this story, and everything was kind of written in service of that. And you kind of don't know what the emotional core of the story is until you get into it. Like, that kind of changes. But I did have these really strong scenes in my mind that I'm not going to spoil for you, but I can't tell you how satisfying it was. It took 10 years to write these books, and so to get to the end of book 4 and finally get to tell that part of the story and tell people, like, the question that I've been kind of teasing for the last 10 years, I finally get to answer, and it was just I can't wait to do it again. I don't know when I'm going to have time, but I loved that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this brings me right into the next question I wanted to ask you was, I'm sure you get asked this about 1,000 times a day, but do you plan to write any more books? I mean, and I know you've already said you don't want to write any more Wingfeather Saga books within the same 1,000 years or so. But in general, do you plan to write any more narratives? Because I think it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to put your heart into one grand story like that. And do you think do you have enough of it left to do another one?
I sure hope so. I'm going to try. The nice thing about writing is that it's something that I can imagine myself doing when I'm 80. It's hard, like the music thing, it's hard to imagine, dragging my guitar through an airport when I'm 80 to go do a show somewhere. But I love the idea of getting better at writing stories. The only way to learn to write is to write. And so by the time I finished the Wingfeather Saga, I was like, I've kind of been through the fire, and I know some things about how stories work that I couldn't have known any other way. And it's made it actually more intimidating because, the more you know about stories, the more you realize how little real control you have over it. You're a servant of the thing. And so all that to say, yes, I definitely want to try to write more. And I have some ideas for the next thing, and I actually have signed the publishing deal, and they've been very patient for about a year now. I'm overdue. So while I'm here in Oxford, I'm hoping to start the next story, whatever that ends up being.
Oh, nice. That's super exciting. Jeez. I didn't know that. That's awesome. So now that we're beyond the books, we're in the show. We're in the middle of the show right now, working on the show. How has it been different? Yeah, I only have experience writing scripts. I don't have any experience writing books. I've always wondered the difference in your brain now after, being we were in the writer's room together and like going from book to script, and not necessarily like just translating from book to script, but how did you feel like a difference between writing a book and then writing a script, like just in general as like a format and like a story narrative?
Oh, totally. Yeah, and to be clear, like there are screenwriters who are very more qualified than I am to write these scripts. I get to be in the room, and I thought early on in this process, I was like, yeah, it'd be fun to learn how to write a teleplay or a screenplay, and now that I've seen how it works, I'm just amazed by the art form. These guys, these men and women who are writing are just amazing, and it's very, very different. I'm trying to think how it's different. Like one of the big things that I've noticed in the scripts is that you have to. Here's the funny thing about sitting right here is that all these people keep walking by and taking pictures of the Eagle and Child sign because they're all Inklings fans. It's kind of embarrassing when you realize you're standing among a bunch of other people who are taking pictures. So anyway, I would just say that the big thing with screenwriting is that it's all about what are the characters doing. Like they have to be doing something, you have to figure out what their motivation is. But if there's nothing happening, no forward motion on the screen, the only way to really know what's going on inside someone is either they tell you or they show you, right? And I was reading Proverbs today, and there was something about, the action versus words, and I'm not going to remember the verse right now, but it's this idea that like what you do is at least as much of who you are as what you say, right? Arguably more. You can give a lot of things lip service, but if you're not loving some people actively, then it's not really love in some ways. Does that make sense? And so, so it's a good lesson to kind of like look at the screenplay and like figure out how do we show the audience what Janner's thinking right now? How do we show them the tension between him and Tink? Or, how do we... It's like the look on Poto's face when sea dragons get brought up. We need to figure out a way to make it so that the audience sees it. Like, how does it work if we mute the dialogue, and play the thing? Does it still convey what's really happening? And I love that. I've been going through the scripts, and like half of my notes are, let's cut this line of dialogue. We don't need to say this. Let them do it. Show them what's happening. Whereas with a book, you have the luxury of getting inside the head of the main character, and you can constantly be telling the reader what's going on inside of Janner's heart. And you can't do that. And it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, that was kind of the first thing that struck me when we started writing these stories was that how are we going to translate all this stuff that Janner's saying in his head onto the screen? I honestly think that probably would have been seemed to be the most difficult challenge for us was like you can express so much with like words alone in a book, but then getting that and just showing it rather than saying it, it's really hard. It's really not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And I do remember the majority of your notes being cut all of this dialogue, cut it all out. But it's good. I mean, but it makes sense because you don't want to, you don't want to treat your audiences like they're stupid, right? Because the moment that you start just feeding them so much information that they already know or could have figured out on their own, is like you're insulting them almost. So it makes sense.
Yeah, there's to go back to Andrew Stanton, the Pixar guy, there's this keynote that he wrote or delivered one time that I happened upon when I was reading or writing the Wingfeather Saga. But one of his principles is give the audience 2 + 2, not 4. So like the audience wants to be engaged, they don't want to like be spoon-fed everything that you mean, so you can suggest to them, here's what we're getting at, and leave them to kind of fill in the blank. And he jokes are the perfect example. Like if you have to explain the punchline, it isn't funny. Like the laughter comes when you connect the dots in your mind and you're like, oh, I get it, right? And so as a storytelling principle, like you have to trust that the audience is going to keep up, and also trust that the audience is not like, I enjoy the feeling of not being totally sure what's going on, like when I'm watching something, I like feeling like the storyteller is trusting me to keep up, or if I'm lost, I trust the storyteller that I'm lost for a reason. Does that make sense? And so I would want the audience to watch this show feeling like they're in good hands, that I care deeply about communicating the heart of the story, but so does the entire team of 72 people or however many. That like we are trying really hard to tell this story the most beautiful way possible. So sometimes that means silence. Sometimes that means we don't know exactly what's going to happen next. Sometimes we have to figure out, wait, why did Poto react that way? Or if they didn't tell us why he reacted that way, I've got to trust that they're going to tell me sooner or later, or that they left the question hanging for a reason.
Oh yeah, and oftentimes, silence can say a lot more than words could probably say, which I think is really important, especially in a story that has some really sad parts to it. It's not necessarily this happy story all the time. So I think it's important to give it space for the moments that need space. Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Thank you for answering all those questions, Andrew. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I want you to go ahead and get back to, or at least start to get writing on that new series. So we're going to open it up for questions. If there are any questions, may not be any questions, but if there were any questions in the comments, we'd like to go ahead and open it up to that. Maybe we can answer some questions. Okay, so Isabel said, do you have any advice for anyone who's just starting to write?
Yeah. Don't try to write an epic novel first. One of the best things you can do is try to write a short story. Because like I said earlier, until you get to the end of something, you can't really go back and edit it or understand the story arc or how the story really works. And so sometimes young writers tend to have these huge visions for this giant story that they're going to tell, and let's face it, it just almost never gets finished. There's a whole lot of good reasons to not finish a book that you started. And so for a young writer, I usually tell, I don't know how old you are, Isabel, but I can tell you that for young writers, I usually tell them, figure out a way to finish the story in the next 10 pages. And then go back and edit it, and then print it out and share it with your friends. And then you get the thrill of having finished something. You get to get feedback on the thing, and then the next story maybe make it 5 pages longer than the last one. So you kind of cut your teeth on shorter things before you get to the big stuff.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. Thank you for that question, Isabel. That was great. Ooh, Marty says, what's your favorite Lord of the Rings / Tolkien book?
Oh, wow. Oh, man. Well, if we're going to be super nerdy, the whole thing is one book. So I would just say Lord of the Rings, which is divided into 7 books, but was always meant to be one book. So, they at the time, they didn't want to publish a book that used that much paper, so we had to break it up into 3. That's impossible to answer. I mean, I haven't read the Silmarillion. I've read the beginning of it. I am a giant fan of the Lord of the Rings, but I haven't spent a ton of time digging into his other writing. I don't know that I have the mind for it.
Ooh. Hey, and while we're here, I was going to ask you this later when we are in person, but let's just ask you now. Have you seen the new Lord of the Rings trailer that's coming out?
So I have, and I am like pensively excited about it. I want it to be good really
Nice.
bad, but I'm not kidding. It's going to be good. Yeah, I'm not that worried about it. It's like
Yeah,
at this
I don't
point,
think I am
there's things like that's how I feel about Star Wars. I don't want to bash it if you guys are huge Star Wars fans, but I loved the original Star Wars trilogy, and I would have thought that the greatest thing in the world would be a TV series like The Mandalorian or Obi-Wan Kenobi, and honestly, for whatever reason, whenever the thing happens that I thought I would love, I just would almost rather it exist in my imagination and pretend like it's awesome than be disappointed, So I haven't gotten to watch some of those because I'm just kind of nervous that I'm going to hate it. So I kind of feel like that about this. But I will definitely be tuning in to see if it holds up.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Marty, for that last question. Frayed asks, how did you start developing your characters and make them relatable? I think that's a great question because that is very difficult in writing, from what I understand.
Yeah. For me, developing the character is just writing the story. Like, you don't really know who the character is until you get into the book. I feel like I only was beginning to understand Janner in the very last scene of the very last book of the Wingfeather Saga. I was like, oh, that's Janner's central flaw. That's Janner's central virtue. I kind of was able to, the light bulb went on. So your characters develop, you give them free reign to kind of develop as you write the story. And it's okay if in your first draft that's really uneven, because then you get to go back in the second draft and edit it and tighten it up, because then you know the character and you can kind of rewrite the scenes, rewrite the dialogue to fit what you now know about them, having finished the book. And then the other thing I would say, I got this advice from Reed Arvin, who's a record producer and a novelist teacher. He just said that when he was writing his book, he asked himself at every turn, what would a real person actually say in this moment? And so with the dialogue, with the situations, if Janner sees a toothy cow in the woods, I go, what would a real 12-year-old boy say or do when he saw this? And then I would just see what happened, that's the thing, keep as hard as you can while you're writing your story, ground it in reality, because reality is a good thing, right? And so the more grounded, the more gritty and earthy the world is, the more genuine the reactions are or the conversations are, the more you're going to discover who these characters really are. I don't know if that makes sense, but just ask yourself as you're writing the novel, what would a real person say?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved the amount of people taking selfies behind you as you were talking about that. With the
so funny. Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Fred. That's a really important question to ask, because I think it's a difficult thing. I think it just takes time and practice, from what I understand. Okay, so we'll probably do one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Have one more question. Awesome. And asks, designs for the Stranders been thought of yet?
Okay, say it one more time. Have what for the Stranders?
Have the designs for the Stranders been thought of yet?
Oh. You know what? I don't know that we have begun designing the Stranders. So the answer is no. That's a quick and easy answer. I don't think the character designers have dug into the Stranders just yet, but it's going to be coming very soon. We're well down the road into season 2, as we kind of are testing the waters on the fundraise. So yeah.
Cool. All right, we're going to do one more question. Just because we have a little bit more time left. Is there anything in the show that you feel like improves on the books? So is there anything in the show that we're adding that you think that actually makes the story a little bit better?
Yeah, man. I have one quick, easy answer for that. When we were working on the short film, one of the things that carried over into the series is where Glipwood sits. In the books, Glipwood is a short walk back from the cliffs, And I remember when we were working with the background artists and designers for the short film. Tom Owens, who directed it, I think it was his idea. He was like, why don't we just put the town on the cliff, and what if we put like crevasses, with bridges that kind of go between it? And I was like, man, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. That's such a cooler version of Glipwood, with it hunkered right on the edge of the cliff, because it was something that I wouldn't have thought of until we got into the visuals. I'm trying to think what else there is. Like, there are some, there are a few tweaks that we have made in the story that move some characters up. I'm not going to spoil anything, but her name might be Sarah Cobbler. She has a slightly more prominent presence in season 1 than she did in book 1, and I love that. I think it's great because that's a great example. Like, Sarah Cobbler became one of my very favorite characters in the story, and I didn't know who she was until I got to book 2, and it was all inspired by that footnote in chapter 1 of book 1. And so it's really fun to see her interacting with Janner and the Igiby kids. So yeah, that's an improvement. I will say really quick before we go that one of the cool feelings in the world was sitting in the writer's room for season 1 and listening to these guys who were just amazing at this, breaking down a story into episodes and seasons, and because you have to think about telling the story in a different way since it's visual. And I had this like delightful feeling that like the Wingfeather Saga as a story was like moving. We were getting closer to its platonic form. You know what I mean? It was like, I have my book version of the story, and then we're taking this visual version of the story over here, and they're both circling this like imaginary, real, quote unquote, version of the story that happened in actual history or something. You know what I mean? So it's like we're coming at the same thing in 2 different ways, and I'm getting a clearer picture of the actual thing in the process. So there are little tweaks that we've made, but I feel like those tweaks are actually getting closer to the heart of what the Wingfeather Saga actually is.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I remember when I was so confident after the writer's room with those scripts. I was like walking down, I had the big stack of them. I was like, these are the best scripts in the world, and I slammed them on the desk. And then I remember it going down the line, through production of like design, all these things. And by the end, it was pretty different of a, visually, like storytelling wise. And I was like, that it's so much better now than it was then when I was so confident about it.
Yeah.
And it's just awesome to see these pros making it so much better, like every step of the way. And yeah, I agree. It's just kind of like turning into this version of itself that feels like the right version, almost, in a way. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nomad, for that question.
What's cool about that? Yeah, I would just say that it feels like the book is augmenting the animated series, and the animated series is augmenting the books. It's almost like they become footnotes of each other or something, in the coolest way. So anyway, The Princess Bride was that way. Like, the Princess Bride book actually makes the movie a little better, and the movie makes the book a little better. And so that's what we were going for. And we couldn't have done it without this incredible team. You included, Clay Mortensen.
Hey, whoa. Hey, don't flatter me on a live stream, Andrew. Come on. Thank you, Nomad, for that last question. I just want to remind everyone again, can we throw up the merch one more time? I just think it's awesome. Can we throw up those t-shirts? Look at those t-shirts. If you want to go buy one, please go to the wingfeathersaga.com/store, and in the comments, tell us what you want to see merch-wise. What ideas do you have? What would you want to get as merch from the show? And if you have any comments on what you want to see in our next live stream, also leave those in the comments. And if you want to learn anything more about season 2, go to angel.com/wingfeather to learn more. I think Andrew is gone already, so I'll go ahead and say the goodbye. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. It was a pleasure to have all you guys, and we'll see you in the next live stream.
I really was wanting to put something in the world that the grown-up gets as much out of it as the kids do. More, arguably. I really believe that something special happened with this story. We could not believe how many people jumped on board to help us bring this thing to the screen.
It is the most amazing thing to be in a position now where we can bring this to the screen.
It's whimsical and it's fun, but it's also got a lot of heart. My goal is to make you cry as much as you laugh.
Can't just run off.
They've got a pop rocket!
Really? When you ran off, I had to leave Lily alone. Lily?
Lily!
Here's a pluck of feathers.
Aye, lock it up. The black carriage is here.